$49.5 million. That is what Ford calculated human lives were worth in 1973. On the other side of the ledger, $137.5 million. That is what it would cost to fix the car. Ford did not hide those numbers. They did not bury them somewhere. They filed them with the federal government, signed their names to them, and used that math to argue the fix was not worth doing. And for years after that document hit a government filing cabinet in Washington, people burned alive in Fords. This is not a story about an engineering mistake. Ford's own engineers flagged the problem before the first Pinto left the factory floor. This is the story of what happened after they flagged it. What got calculated, what got filed, and what got ignored. The year is 1968. Lee Iacocca has just become Ford's president, riding high off the Mustang, the car that made him a legend in Detroit. And he is watching Volkswagen eat Ford alive in the American subcompact market. His mandate is brutal and simple. Build a car under 2,000 pounds, price it under $2,000, and put it in showrooms in 25 months. The normal development cycle at the time was 43 months. Iacocca wanted it done in 25. The shortest production schedule in American automotive history at that point. That compression had consequences, because in a normal development cycle, you build the car, you crash test it, you redesign what fails, then you commit the tooling. Iacocca's timeline did not allow for that sequence. Ford spent $200 million tooling the production line before the safety testing was fully complete. Once $200 million is committed, you do not redesign. You find reasons the test results are acceptable. Now, the fuel tank. The Pinto had a trunk space problem. To give the car a usable trunk with a short rear end, engineers positioned the fuel tank behind the rear axle, between the axle and the bumper. The safer option was an over-axle saddle tank, the kind Ford already used in the European Capri. That design kept the tank above and forward of the axle, protected by the car's frame structure. Ford owned the patent on the saddle tank. They chose not to use it. When the company ran pre-production crash tests, the results were not subtle. When a Pinto was backed into a fixed barrier at just 20 miles per hour in some configurations, the tank weld split open, the filler pipe pulled loose, and the tank dropped from the car. Ford crash tested the Pinto more than 40 times before it went to market. The tank ruptured in every test run above 25 miles per hour. Every single one. 3 fixes were available. A 1-pound plastic baffle between the tank and the differential housing cost $1. A Goodyear rubber fuel bladder cost $5.08 to $8 per car. Ford tested the bladder in December 1970 and again in January 1971. Both times it worked. A rear structural guard cost $4.20 per car. None of them were installed in the production Pinto. Iacocca's rule was absolute. Not an ounce over 2,000 pounds, not a cent over $2,000. When a crash test proved the $1 plastic piece stopped tank puncture, an engineer recalled what happened next. It was thrown out. Extra cost, extra weight. Here's what the engineering actually shows and why it matters. The Pinto's tank sat in what safety consultant Byron Block later called a hostile environment. Directly behind it, a thin rear bumper with almost no crush space. Directly in front of it, the differential housing, a solid iron unit studded with protruding bolt heads pointing straight at the tank wall. In a rear-end collision above 25 miles per hour, physics does the rest. The impacting vehicle drives the bumper forward. The bumper collapses. There's almost nothing to absorb the energy. The tank gets crushed between the bumper and the differential. The bolt heads punch through the tank wall. The filler pipe tears loose. Fuel sprays into the passenger compartment and onto hot exhaust components. One spark and the car is on fire. In some crash configurations, the door locks jammed on impact, trapping occupants inside the burning car. Ford's own whistleblower, senior engineer Harley Kopp, would later testify to the exact imbalance in the design. The Pinto's body structure could absorb a 40 to 50 miles per hour rear impact without serious injury to occupants. The fuel tank was built to withstand only 20 miles per hour. The car could take the hit. The tank could not. That gap was known before the first Pinto was sold. 1973, NHTSA proposes a new federal standard for fuel system integrity, specifically for rollover accidents. Ford's Environmental and Safety Engineering Division responds with a formal submission. The document is titled Fatalities Associated with Crash-Induced Fuel Leakage and Fires. Its authors, Ford employees Ernest Grush and Carol Saunders. It becomes known as the Grush/Saunders Report, or simply the Pinto Memo. The math in that memo is exact and cold. Applying the proposed safety standard to the entire U.S. vehicle fleet, all manufacturers, 12.5 million cars and light trucks, would cost $11 per vehicle in modifications. Total fixed cost, $137.5 million. The projected benefit from preventing burn deaths and injuries, 180 deaths avoided, each valued at $200,000 using NHTSA's own actuarial tables. 180 serious burn injuries avoided, valued at $67,000 each. 2,100 vehicles not destroyed at $700 each. Total benefit to society, $49.5 million. Ford's conclusion, the regulation is not cost justified. The fix costs nearly 3 times what the lives are worth. Here's the thing almost every other channel gets wrong about this document. The Grush/Soundby memo was written specifically about rollover accidents, not rear-end collisions. It never mentions the Pinto by name. It covers the entire US fleet. But the final line of the memo states that similar analysis for other impact modes would be expected to yield comparable results. Ford was telling the government, this math works for every kind of crash. Do not regulate us. And the $200,000 per life? Ford did not invent that number. They pulled it from NHTSA's own 1972 actuarial tables. They used the government's own price on human life to argue against protecting human lives. May 1972. Lily Gray is driving a 1972 Pinto on a Southern California freeway. The car stalls. A following vehicle rear-ends her at 37 miles per hour. The tank ruptures. Gray suffers fatal burns. Her passenger, 13-year-old Richard Grimshaw, survives. He will spend the next decade undergoing surgeries to repair disfiguring burns across his face and body. Grimshaw versus Ford Motor Company goes to trial in Orange County in 1978. 6 months of testimony, and at trial, a second Ford document surfaces, the Fuel System Integrity Program Financial Review. In it, Ford engineers recommended deferring the installation of rubber fuel bladders, available for $4 to $8 per car, across all Ford vehicles until 1976. The documented reason, the delay would save Ford $20.9 million. This document was not about rollovers. It was specifically about rear-end fuel system protection, and it recommended delay for cost savings. The jury awards $125 million in punitive damages, the largest product liability verdict in U.S. history at that point. The trial judge reduces it to $3.5 million, but the California Appellate Court upholds the award in full, writing that Ford had shown callous and conscious disregard of public safety. Ford is still selling Pintos during this trial. Their radio advertising line, written by the agency J. Walter Thompson, Pinto leaves you with that warm feeling. The agency eventually dropped the line, not before it ran. August 10, 1978. 3 teenage girls from the Ulrich family stopped their 1973 Pinto on a highway near Goshen, Indiana, to retrieve a gas cap that fell from the roof during a fuel stop. A van traveling at approximately 50 miles per hour strikes them from behind. The Pinto erupts in flames. Judy, Lynn, and Donna Ulrich all die. An Elkhart County grand jury indicts Ford Motor Company on 3 counts of reckless homicide. It is the first time in American history that a corporation has been charged with murder. The prosecution budget, $20,000. Ford's defense, a 20-member team including lawyers, researchers, and support staff, operating out of a rented 2-story building in Winamac, Indiana. Meals delivered daily so no one had to leave the courthouse. Ford's lead attorney was James Neal, the former Watergate special prosecutor who had successfully prosecuted H.R. Haldeman. The prosecution tried to enter the Grush/Soundby memo into evidence. The judge ruled it inadmissible. The memo covered rollover accidents, not rear-end collisions. On a strict evidentiary reading, it did not apply to the Ulrich crash. So the prosecution leaned on Harley Kopp, Ford's own former senior engineer, forced into early retirement in 1976, apparently because he had pushed safety concerns too hard internally. Kopp told the court that the Pinto was originally designed to meet a 30 miles per hour rear impact standard, agreed at an August 1969 meeting with Iacocca. Ford abandoned that standard, he testified, at an April 22, 1971 product review. The documented reason, a $6.65 saving per car. Ford's defense called the former head of NHTSA, Douglas Toms, who testified that the 1973 Pinto was a conventional vehicle, no less safe than competing subcompacts of the same era. Ford's own engineers testified they drove Pintos personally and gave them to their children. The jury deliberated for 20 hours. On March 13, 1980, not guilty on all 3 counts. Several jurors stated afterward they did not think the Pinto was a safe car, but the evidence was not sufficient to meet the criminal standard. The prosecution had $20,000 and a part-time county prosecutor. Ford had James Neal. Ford had lobbied against Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 301, the rear impact fuel system standard, for 8 years. 8 years of regulatory delay while Pinto stayed on the road. In August 1977, investigative journalist Mark Dowie published Pinto Madness in Mother Jones using documents obtained through the Grimshaw trial proceedings. The article called the Pinto a fire trap and put the cost-benefit math in front of the American public for the first time. NHTSA opened an investigation. The test they used to force the recall is itself worth noting. They ran it with a heavier-than-standard barrier, extra weights in the nose to maximize contact with the tank, headlights on as a potential ignition source, and the tank filled with gasoline rather than the mineral spirits normally used in crash tests. A worst-case configuration. When asked later why they forced a recall for failing a 35 miles per hour test that most small cars of that era would have failed, an NHTSA engineer said, "Just because your friends get away with shoplifting does not mean you should." On June 9, 1978, Ford recalled 1.5 million Pintos and 30,000 Mercury Bobcats. The fix: a polyethylene shield around the tank and a redesigned filler tube. Approximate cost per car: $11. The NHTSA confirmed death toll tied specifically to the rear-end fuel tank defect. 27 deaths across 38 fire incidents between 1970 and mid-1977. Mark Dowie's original estimate: between 500 and 900. CBS's 60 Minutes would later cite 2,000. Ford disputed all three figures. The confirmed number is 27. 27 people whose deaths Ford had calculated into a spreadsheet and decided were acceptable. Here's how this story gets taught in business schools. Ford ran a cost-benefit analysis on human lives, got caught, and suffered a catastrophic PR collapse. The lesson: do not get caught. That framing misses the point entirely. Ford did not hide their math. They submitted it to the federal government. NHTSA used the same methodology, the same $200,000 per life figure, in their own regulatory work. Cost-benefit analysis on safety decisions was standard practice across the entire U.S. auto industry, codified in a 1974 executive order by President Gerald Ford. What makes the Pinto case different is not that the math happened. It is what the math was protecting. Ford engineers knew the specific fixes: a $1 plastic piece, a $5 rubber bladder, a $4 steel guard. They tested them. The bladder worked twice. The baffle worked in testing. Not one of those solutions made it into production. Not because of an engineering failure, but because of a timeline and a price ceiling set by one man before the crash tests came back. Harley Kopp, the engineer who spent his career at Ford and ended it testifying against them, put it the most precisely. The Pinto did not have a balanced design. The body could take a 40 miles per hour hit. The tank was built for 20. That was not an accident. That was arithmetic. And somebody signed off on it.